Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Monday Motivation. I'm your host, Daniel Krakowski, joined as always by, what do you want to go by today?
Just Goran.
Goran Vazovic.
Yes.
And
thank you.
Who we're all really excited to have with us today is...
Super excited.
You saw him on Instagram.
You saw him on Instagram. You might have heard him on the radio. You might have seen him in the video. No, I'm just kidding. He's a good friend of mine. He's a customer of VSM, of course.
I feel like you just took my friendship with Shaz away by being like, he's a good friend of mine.
Okay, well, ours. How about
sure.
that? All right, so give him
another episode of
Go ahead, Daniel. Continue with all the other
we have Shaz Khan
trophies.
Goalcast. Creating content. If you're not following him on Facebook, you're wasting so much time. Like you could be learning so much and just expanding.
How many Facebook followers are you at right now?
Somewhere between 29,000 and 30,000.
It's incredible.
It is incredible. And the Goalcast video that you released has how many views now? 8
million, I think, yeah.
8 million.
Right.
That's 8 million.
Wow.
How, like, for example, just to put things into context, on a daily or weekly basis, the amount of people that you don't know that reach out to you in order to solve ridiculous problems or whatever it's happening, is that overwhelming?
Yeah, it actually is. I'm glad you asked that. So I think, we're all a little broken, right? And
even Daniel? That's a question mark.
Especially Daniel.
I don't know. The Krakowski Corporation doesn't crack.
There's a lot of alliteration there. As a writer, I appreciate that. We're all a little broken in different ways, and the number of messages that I get can be overwhelming because I see that, I know I have this gift of phrasing ideas and concepts and potential solutions, ways to think, perspectives in certain ways, and some people find that, somewhat attractive, and so they'll reach out with like, hey, can you help me with my situation? The thing is that I'm not here to bring solutions to people. I'm here to encourage them to ask more questions. And those are the introspective questions of, okay, if you can ask yourself this and honestly answer them to yourself, you'll probably come to the right conclusions as opposed to, trying to encourage people to come ask me because I don't have your answers. I mean, there's no such thing as a guru, as Tony Robbins would say, or as Gary Vee would say. I'm not trying to be that, so I'm just trying to redirect my content a little bit more to be more emphatic on that point. Right.
I think a lot of people, and even Isaac himself, being a 19-year-old, he's looking outward, trying to get the right answer from people and have others tell him what the right choice is. And really, it's going to be, what he figures out is the best for him, and he's going to have that quote-unquote right choice.
Right.
But so many people want to first go out there because they don't want to go, they don't want to look at themselves first, or they don't want to be introspective.
And the other thing, too, is that, I get it. When you look towards somebody who's saying things that you like to hear or who has even the result that you want to have, that you'd want to know what they did. And 90% of the time, if you do what someone else did, you're going to get the result they get, generally speaking.
Right.
But when it comes to life and emotions and relationships and a lot of the intrinsic portions of how your mind functions and interacts with the reality around you, just because you do what someone else did doesn't mean you're going to get the same results, because in your interaction with your own self and other people, you're going to be dealing with ideas, thought processes that are not that person's. And so doing the same thing as them might get you a completely different result.
I have a pretty funny example of that. I just came back from this training, and a lot of the people who were speaking at it were the real estate coaches that RE/MAX bring in for their top teams for whoever they're dealing with. And this guy was speaking to a broker owner of a company, and he was trying to figure out what he could do to improve his business. It started going down a little bit, and the coach goes, yeah, what? So what's like the first thing that you think about? Like when you're thinking about these people, how are you engaging with them? And he's like, well, I hate people. And then that was the first.
It was like, what?
That was the first thing he said. And the coach goes, well, you're in the wrong business. Like this is a people business. Yeah. And he's like, but this company that he had was built to such a size that he couldn't make sense of it. He's like, how could you hate people and build this business up to this large size? And the guy, so he dug a little bit deeper and found out This guy owned this company with his wife. They got divorced within like the past year. His wife was the one showing up and the face and was the one operating the company.
Oh.
So, he was just completely incompatible personality-wise with really the goal of what the business is.
Sure. It's pretty crazy.
I hate people. Did the room laugh or was it silent?
No, they laughed.
Slow
and
clap.
Yeah. There was one other guy who had the same thought. But the coach goes, you just need to sell this business. And the guy did. He just sold the business.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's
so good for him, at least, for recognizing his...
He got the advice and he was like, okay, I'll execute on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's testament, from what I heard at least, to kind of living your truth, like being your authentic self, which is the only time you're ever going to succeed, right? If you're forced to be somebody else when you wake up and show up to whatever you do, whether it's a relationship or a job or, school, if you don't feel like you're living your own life and you're trying to be somebody else or trying to be something else, you're going to give up because it's too hard to be somebody else. You're you.
Right.
Right. And so understanding who that person is, self-awareness, as we always talk about, is the number one most important thing, because once you identify who that person is, you're always going to be compelled to do the things that that person wants to do and not the things that the world at large is trying to convince you to do, which is, those distractions are everywhere. It's
a hard thing for most people to want to do because in general, they're very tired. People are working and how many people don't have time to make it to the gym, but it's kind of like a mental exercise to look inward and start to break yourself down. And it can be painful and it can be emotional and it can force you to confront things that you don't want to confront.
100%.
So,
and that happens daily.
Yeah. And, I'm Simon Sinek's book. I'm reading it right now. And on the plane ride back, I felt like I literally could feel in my head like some pain, some activation of some part of my brain that I had never used before. And it was like really the idea of, for me, it was going deeper and deeper and deeper into the emotional reasons behind why I do what I do. And I'm super excited about it because I feel like it's really calmed me down and it's kind of slowed me down.
Yeah. And
I'm comfortable taking the time and just looking at someone and engaging with them as opposed to trying to, present the version of myself that I want them to perceive in me.
Yeah. And I think you said something really important there about, the innate desire almost to be perceived the way that others want you to be perceived. Because we live in a culture now of immediate gratification, right? And social media and the internet and the availability and access and speed of information is contributing to this. Like as technology exponentially increases, so does our expectation of how we receive validation and recognition and information, right? And so when we're trained, when we're wired to get what we want right away and we don't get it, we either give up or we choose something else that does give us that same immediate dopamine, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to validation or even your career, something that lasts you like decades or life, your life, when somebody has this like deep desire to, let's say, be a poet, right? And everyone around them is a real estate tycoon, let's say. Well, it's incumbent on that person to decide, like, hey, who am I? What do I want? And am I actually going to make a leap and try this? On account of me, A, doing what I love, B, feeling fulfilled in life, and C, discovering something about myself that I could then incorporate into other facets of my life, right? Everything has value. So if I'm a poet, perhaps, that makes me have a great vocabulary. That makes me a great communicator. That makes me empathize with people. And all of those skills are important in other areas regardless. It could be helping my family's business or whatever. But because we don't give ourselves, generally speaking, the opportunity to be that person, to do what we want, because we know that we live in the state of fear of what others might think or being shunned by those closest to us or being embarrassed, and we never go off and do the thing that we want to do because it doesn't give us that immediate feedback, right? No one's like congratulating you that you just became a poet.
Right.
People are congratulating you when you have published work or something, but that period in between where you got to do all that work and no one notices you for your first 700 poems, like no one wants to go through that.
Right.
And as a result, they pick something instead that gives them a feeling of validation, right? Where your peer group around you,
or quick validation.
Yeah, where your peer group around you is like, nice job, good going, right? And the as you all would agree, the toughest battle is when you begin something and no one cares. Because really no one cares. I mean, that's the reality, which is also why I think it's really important as a human being, which is why I write as well, to understand at the minimum other people. That I do not judge what it is that they're doing or choosing to do, but rather I observe, and if they happen to ask, like, what are my thoughts, I'll give them a neutral, objective standpoint, because you never really know how your words are affecting someone else's confidence in what they want to do. Like, you could say, oh yeah, that's stupid, and you might be their role model, and for you to say that just completely shut down the next 5 years of their life. They didn't even try, because my role model said it was stupid.
Right.
Not everyone has the confidence to move forward in the face of somebody they respect telling them no. And I think that's really what it takes, is developing that confidence to do it anyway.
Right.
Because even your role model doesn't know, right? They don't know what's good for you. You might have desires that they would never have. Now, sure, they have results you have, but they achieve those results by being the person they want to be, not the person they want you to be.
Now, very good. What I was going to ask you, you mentioned as far as you being a writer, and we're okay to talk about your upcoming book release. If you want to tell everyone and Daniel the title, what it's going to be about, why you wrote it, etc. Sure. I think it'd be valuable to this podcast.
Awesome. I'd love to. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
So I have a book coming out early 2018. It's called Cancel the Noise. The subtitle is Finding Clarity and Contentment in a World of Distraction. The entire book is it's the stage is set that I took a year offline. In 2014 to 15, I completely disconnected myself from all social media and media. Some of those effects remain. I still don't own a TV. I don't watch TV. I don't have any of that. Social media I've replugged into in order to progress my writing and sharing it with others. However, during this period offline, I went offline because I was at a stage in my life where I didn't know what to do next. I just wasn't happy. I wanted to figure something else out. And while I was still plugged in, as they say, before that, you're hit with a lot of influences. You're seeing people that, you love and respect being successful in something they do. That gives you the idea, oh, maybe I should do that thing. You're told things, you're given the narrative, and you don't really know what you think. So being that I was so frustrated, and this is probably, 75% of the messages that I get are people who have this feeling. So I empathize greatly and dearly. What I say then is you have to step outside the influence. So David Foster Wallace, who's a speaker writer, he has this concept called "This is Water." And I don't know if you guys have heard this, but
I haven't. Have you, Daniel?
No.
Basically, the premise is if you ask a fish what is water, what are they going to say? They might not even know what it is because they've been in it all their life. Right? But it's only by stepping outside of that water, stepping proverbially, right? And coming, swimming out, right? And getting put back in, that you can even answer the question, right? Like, this is water. And so there are some, I kind of parallel that, there are some influences in our life that are so deeply embedded into our psyche, into our everyday life, that we don't even know they exist. And so when I was at the peak of my frustration, the only thing I could think of doing when I didn't know what to do was to step outside of the forms of influence in my life that were so deeply embedded that I might discover something on the other side of them, kind of unplugging from the matrix.
Yeah.
Almost, right? And really, everyday life is the matrix. Anything can become the matrix if you allow it. So I thought, okay, well, what has influence on my life? Well, the internet, my friends, TV, family, a lot of these things do, right? So I'm going to distance myself as much as possible from all of these things. It's a very extreme experiment. I don't recommend that everyone do it that way. Just rather consider the ways that you can disconnect or unplug from influence.
Yeah. So one thing that I learned about myself this weekend is how much of my life is about approval seeking.
Yes.
And, you know, we talked a little bit offline before we started the podcast about this too, where you're like, you know, so much of social media, so much of the speed of communication of technology is about creating that instant gratification for people. So when you first conceptualized doing this, going completely offline for
1 year.
1 year.
Yep. It was very hard to get a hold of Shaz in that year.
How much of it were you looking at it as I'm going to disengage from technology, or did you internalize it more and were you like, I'm going to disengage from seeking approval of others?
Great question. Like I said, I just wanted to identify the water in my life. At that point, I had to take myself out of the focus of figuring out what I'm going to get out of this and just do it because it's something different.
Yeah.
Like just do it, right?
Right.
No infringement, Nike. So, you know,
he is wearing Nikes, by the way. So I don't know. I don't know if he's a paid sponsor. I know we're not getting any checks though.
So I just decided to do it because it was something different. Like I was that frustrated, and so many people are. You become so frustrated with your life that you're just like, what do I do? So I just did something, and the closest thing I could do was to stop doing something. Right?
Yeah.
And when I did that, like the first 3 months was massive fear of missing out. In fact, I would venture to say that is when Goran, your and my friendship probably became a bit stronger too, because, you know, from my perspective, I was willing to engage with fewer people at a deeper level at that point. Mm-hmm. I wasn't keeping myself so occupied with managing the expectations and quote unquote friendships of what were really loose acquaintances and friends of fun, as I'd say.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't know that about myself because, again, when you're around a lot of people and you're getting the feelings that you want, whether it's because you're going out or they're telling you you're awesome or everyone's patting each other on their back, like you have no idea what effect that has on you. You have no idea the things that stops you from doing because you just want that pat on the back. And if you dare do something that doesn't get you that, then all hell breaks loose, right? You have no idea that that's how you actually feel. Yeah. All you know is that these people make me feel good. And that's why I'm totally all about like challenging any form of desire that you have. I'm not saying like don't give in. I'm not a monk or anything like that.
Right.
But question why you desire what you desire. So those were one of many lessons that I learned. Anyway, the first 3 months offline, I had like massive FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, what if people think I'm a loser? What if they think I fell off? I'm not successful. Something happened to me. All these thoughts went through my head, and I actually had to turn. I kid you not. Like, this is how deeply I was thinking about this. Like, you know, when you have an iPhone, you have iMessage, database communication. In that communication, you have read receipts, typing indicators that lets you see when somebody like delivers or reads your messages, and these things were affecting me too because I knew that the other party was able to see when their message was delivered to my phone, when I was typing back, and that exposure made me feel like I was required to respond to individuals that were not necessarily acting in my best interest. Mm-hmm. And so I even turned iMessage off. Like I wanted to be off the radar, off the grid, like fully extreme. I know that sounds a bit neurotic, but it was a great experiment for me because it allowed me to realize just how far I was willing to go, how much I was willing to disconnect in order to find calm and peace in my mind.
Yeah.
So after that first 3 months.
Seems like an escape from neuroses, actually. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
yeah. That's actually a really good point. After that first 3 months offline, I felt a lot more comfortable because when you're away from the influence, you find yourself free of the influence, right? So then I started asking myself, you know, like, what do I like doing? Like now I've got all this time, and you'd be surprised how much time we spend like scrolling through our phones.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what people were doing when they were waiting in between things because right now I just like look at my phone and there's a message there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I'm scrolling Facebook
or what we even did, you know, we had cell phones, but let's say the flip phones, right, where you didn't really do much on them. It was just communication.
Right.
And I'm just trying to figure out what did I do?
You just texted your friends.
I did. Playa. No, I was playing Snake.
And winning.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, it was just a matter of me asking myself, okay, what do I like? What do I want to do? Let's try something. And here's the key. when I realized that I was outside of the observation, of the perception of others who might, again, shun me, tell me no, not validate me, recognizing outside of my own eyes that I was no longer in their gaze, it gave me the confidence and the freedom to do things that I was actually afraid to do, but I didn't know I was afraid to do. For me, for example, like I hadn't stepped in a gym in probably like I think all my life, right? Like honestly, I mean, I was always that super skinny nerd, you know, the classic case. And that is because when I was a kid, I was teased, and a lot of the kids that teased me ended up being like gym rats, right? Like they were like these big buff guys, and I always mentally associated that with like mental inferiority. I'm like, these are the dumb people that always tease the smart kid. And I knew I was smart, you know?
Right.
And I associated that. And as a result, I never went out of my way to think about the health benefits of actually working out. I always saw it as, okay, well, now I'm the smallest guy, but I have a big brain, so I don't need to do the thing that the dumb guy with the little brain is doing. That's not my space. I live in the real world. They live in the gym, right? I never considered any other perspective. Being offline, I was like, what if I just started like working out or something like that? That's been something I've been afraid to do because I'd be encountering those individuals in their landscape. But when I flipped my perspective and I realized like, hey, this has health benefits. I could do something new. What if I feel better? What if I look better? I just started doing it, and I realized that I gained new confidence doing a thing I'd never done. And now it's become a semi-regular part of my lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Like I know what I'm capable of now. And when you begin to do things that give you newfound confidence, that sparks more confidence to do similar things in other areas of your life. Just like the time Goran and I decided we're going to go skydiving out of nowhere, right? I mean, you're facing a fear.
It happened.
We were literally driving, and I'm like, we can go skydiving. He's like, really? Let's do it.
Yeah, it was either lunch or skydiving, and we did both, of course.
And
well done.
Yes,
and I just think that goes to show the importance of facing your fears. You know, but you can only, like, it's easy to say face your fears, right? Who doesn't want to do that? But it's much harder to do it when you're being faced with influences that you don't know you have in front of you.
Right.
Do you think too that there was also a component of, you know, if you may have been able to look into yourself and say, hey, I want to improve these things about my life before you went offline. But I have to imagine that when you're confronted with no distractions, you know, not even the validation component, but you can just, you know, fast forward your life 3 hours essentially by putting something on TV and just sitting there. Without the ability to do that, you now have to find something to occupy your time.
Correct.
And whether it's thinking, whether it's some activity, I know a lot of I read some book where they were referencing this guy trying to get into meditating and going over to China, and they would make him sit there, and they're like, usually 4 days, you know, we're gonna make you sit there, and your goal is just to clear your mind, but you first have to think through everything that ever happened in your life. So like, just think of every memory that you possibly can and just play it through. And this guy did it, and in 4 days, he was like, I literally had nothing else that I could remember that ever happened in my life that I could think about. So it just kind of took me to this serenity.
Sure.
Did you experience anything kind of like that?
Totally. I don't know if this is part of like not being in the matrix, but it seems to be a similar experience that so many that have done similar things have had. I learned to meditate, and that is only because, again, I had heard this word floating around, and in fact, in a relationship I had prior, I was being asked to like, hey, you want to go meditate? And I'd be like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that. Like, that's for what? Yeah, I was telling myself, and I was saying out loud, that's for weak-minded people who don't have it together, people who don't have anything else to do. Like, why would you sit and be quiet, right? And it was only after I challenged my own biases and I started doing something that I wouldn't have otherwise done that I realized the value in it and finding that serenity.
I love there's so many examples where you can find of people, and we, you know, taking and looking at some other tangentially related concept to what they pride themselves on.
Yes.
And saying that, hey, that's not for me, that's below me.
Yes.
Like, hot yoga, for example. A lot of people who go to the gym, the people we alluded to earlier, they tend to look at that as a feminine pursuit or something that's less challenging, less difficult, until they do it. And then they realize how difficult it is, and that it's a whole different set of, it's a different kind of difficult for them to engage in.
100%, dude. I agree with that so much. So the larger lesson, I think what I was doing is every time I was finding myself outside of the influence, willing to do something I'd never done because I'm going to try something new for the sake of trying it, realizing what I'm discovering about myself, and then finding a pattern between each of those discoveries. The number one thread was that every time I told myself no, it wasn't actually based on any real data. It was based on my bias. It was based on an idea that was ingrained in me from somewhere else, or just an assumption I made. Mm-hmm. And when we challenge ourselves to break through those things, and we do things that we wouldn't have thought of doing, we discover so much about ourselves, but so much about the world and others, and we just connect better with the world around us, people around us. I mean, again, if you tell yourself, I don't hang out with this type of person, mm-hmm. right? And you don't even know why you're saying that, because somebody told you, or your parents told you this, or when you were growing up, one of those people like punched you or something like that. Like, those are all bullshit reasons, right? Yeah. But if we get to a point where we're willing to engage that other person, and we realize, like, oh, hey, people are people. Like, it doesn't matter what they are, whether you're talking about, any classification, you're able to then do things that you would have never otherwise done.
Yeah.
I mean, a great example is one of my good friends, Antonio, right? Mm-hmm. Our friend. Like, him and I were just kind of like, we came from opposite worlds in school. And now we're business partners, and that's a challenge that a lot of people are afraid to take. But by addressing those challenges, by going through these exercises, challenging yourself to do things that you've never done, you'll find yourself having the confidence to address conversations and perspectives that you never had, that you were afraid to have. So here I am talking to, my best friend, and saying, hey, if we do business together, like, this could ruin our friendship, but let's address the ramifications of that. Let's address the ways in which that we'll challenge each other, and the ways in which we need to be cautious before we do this. And, 2 years in, so far so good. Doesn't mean challenges don't arise, but you're now equipped with the confidence to address those challenges. And that's what I think the important part of stepping outside the influence is. So this is the premise of why I wrote this book. And I get into a lot of more intricate lessons, some of them being as deep as, what language do we use when we communicate with ourselves and the world around us?
Right. Well, two things. First thing is, when the book comes out, you are going to be doing the Audible yourself, mm-hmm. or having it on audio, and you're going to be using our studio to do it, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. And because I won't be reading it, because I'll be listening to it. And then two, you're talking about the people and relationships and the value that you got from, because we live in such a highly connected world and society. I just know what Daniel has done, but I don't know the deeper meaning behind it.
Right.
And you touched on it as far as when you unplug from everyone online or everything online, and you engage this person in person, mm-hmm. or persons, how much more valuable and the deeper conversation you have, and the value essentially that you got from it.
Yeah.
So I guess, talk a little bit to that as far as the benefit that you saw.
Sure.
Well, most people will look at it, he just, went into a cave and reemerged to reconnect with society. But then when in fact it was the opposite.
Right. I mean, you learn, again, it's all about learning. Life is about growth, right? If you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
Right? And we're dying anyway.
Right.
So you might as well try to get better and better and provide some value and
grow into death.
Yeah. I mean, honestly. So if I were to zoom out of this book and talk about why this is important, human life is fragile, right? We have this finite mortality. You're born and then you die. Right. And that's a matter of fact. And that could be either a depressing thought or a very motivating one. And I choose to live the motivating one, because I know that death is coming. It is imminent. I don't know when it is. I don't know how it happens, but it comes. And let's say that you live to 100 years old. That's if you're lucky, but let's say you live to 100 years, right? You spend, what, 1/3 of it sleeping, 8 hours a day out of 24, right? Mm-hmm. So 33 years out of that 100 you sleep, which is insane. And that's just to sustain you, to be able to live the other 67.
Right.
Amidst that, you're working and you're interacting and you're going to the bathroom and you're eating and you're doing all of these things. And based on the math that I did, which I won't get into right now, you've got somewhere between 12 and 25 years of actual time you get to do what you want to do. And so when you notice just like how small that percentage is, not only with respect to like the length of that 100-year life, but also in the ocean of time. Like, humans haven't been here that long, and look at all we've accomplished. Like, that makes you want to contribute to that system that is humanity, right? Whether it be technology, whether it be business. Going over here.
Sorry.
Scrolling Instagram as we're talking.
No, I had to post stuff during the podcast. I'm sorry. It won't happen again.
It's all good. But when you find yourself willing to contribute in a way that pays homage to just how short life is, I think that's when we step into our higher self. So for me, this book is a way for me to share insights that I've had in hopes that it helps other people decipher the confusion that has become life. And that confusion comes from so many different places. It comes from influence. I'm not saying destroy influence. I'm saying step outside of it for a little so you understand it. Feel free to plug back in to get the good parts of it, but then know the ways in which people and things and ideas and media affects you. And so this is why I believe that we live lives of legacy. Everyone on this earth is trying to leave some kind of legacy. And I will argue that to the end, because whether you're having children or you're building a business or you're trying to be happy or you just want to see other people happy, all of that is you attempting to influence the world around you in a way that transcends your own life, because you're stepping outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. The selfish life is the most unfulfilling life, and that is because what more do we have? Like, you're literally here and then you're gone. Like, that's not a romantic thought. So the only way we can romanticize this inevitability is by assisting other people and stepping outside of ourselves through another little human that carries on the values that we passed along, or building something that gives jobs and meaning to the world well beyond ourselves.
I think what you said is really important, and how we're all trying to create our legacy and trying to achieve some brand of immortality, right? If we can. But once you can find the way to achieve that you connect with the most, I think that's really where you can start to find that fulfillment. Yeah. Because, there's just so many of us, and I think I still am definitely on this journey and trying to discover as much as I possibly can about it. But, doing something for no reason. You could even be doing the same activity, but once you can conceptualize it and put it into words, it becomes so much better. It just feels great.
Totally. I mean, again, business is not a romantic thought, right? There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of pain. It's highly transactional at the bottom dollar value. But how does one justify it in this context? Well, you could either say, and that's why I was saying words are so important, and you just alluded to it, I have an entire chapter on the lexicon we use. And the reason for that is because the words that we use to describe our activities and our thoughts and our feelings outside are the very words we use in our head, in the narrative we talk to ourselves. So there are studies that say that, regardless of what languages you speak, your primary language is the language that you use in your brain. Right? Like when you talk to yourself, that voice in your head that doesn't make any sense. It's not really a voice, but you hear yourself talking.
Yeah.
Well, it's the unfiltered truth, because you go through your filter and then you blurt it out.
Sure. Yeah. And some of us have no filter, which is arguably a good thing. But but that voice in your head is happening in your primary language. So if you speak English, it's happening in English, right? If that's your primary language. And so how important is it then to make sure that we're using the right words when that voice is talking to us? Because, I mean, it sounds completely crazy, but I think every human being can relate. It's a facet of human consciousness to have a voice that speaks to us, even though it's coming from us, right? Mm-hmm. Ideas pop into your head. You don't control when the next idea shows up. It just comes to your head, right?
Right.
And to be able to understand that that is happening and you get to take control of that conversation and you get to dictate the words that you use, the very vocabulary that you employ when you're having that conversation is going to affect the way that you feel about the things that are being discussed in that conversation. And the way that you feel about those is then going to dictate the way you show up to the world and have those conversations and your confidence when it comes to those things. So as I was saying with business, it's not romantic. I could say, oh yeah, I'm running a business, I'm trying to make $100 million. Doesn't sound very motivating, doesn't sound very compelling, and it's probably, if it's a conversation you have in your head like that, you're not going to convince many other people to join you on that journey, and no one does anything alone. However, if you have the right reason and you're using the right words and you want to leave a legacy and you want to give jobs and you want to create value in the world, all of a sudden those are words that activate your mind to think more about your reasons and your feelings and just how compelling it is for you. When that becomes your narrative and those are truly the words that you use in your head, well, what words are going to come out? The exact same conversation is going to come out, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think the mirror of introspection is so important, because you get to frame the way that you show up to the world before you show up to it. And when you show up that way, all of a sudden you've romanticized something that would otherwise not be. Right? You're saying these are the reasons, and it's the Simon Sinek concepts of the start with why. You're talking about why you're doing things, and people are moved by why you do it, not by what you're doing. And it doesn't matter what that is. Some things are more predisposed to certain elements of happiness and joy, like who doesn't want to bask in the sunshine, who doesn't want to go on vacation. But those aren't things that build legacies. Those are outcomes that we gain, or the ability to do those things from creating value, right? I wish to do all of these things so that I can enjoy my life while I'm bringing value to other people. And that is, in essence, how great organizations
And simultaneously, the why, too, can also create the realization in yourself that, hey, I can delay gratification on those items, those things that I do want, to focus on this specific mission, the task at hand.
Totally.
So it all kind of circles back around.
Yeah. But it just goes to show, I had a really tough time, in all honesty, piecing this book together, because I'm kind of talking about life, I'm talking about influence, and I'm talking about all the ways in which we can frame ourselves to live the fullest and best version of our lives. That sounds very generic. It's nothing that anyone hasn't talked about before. And so I had a difficult time kind of linearizing this thought process and how do I go about approaching these subjects. So what I did is I start with the most basic thing, self-awareness. Chapter 1 is about self-awareness. What is it? The fact that 85% of adults think that they're self-aware, but when actually faced with questions based on real science and data from experts, they realize that they're not. So that means only 15% of the population is truly self-aware. And I don't say this as an authority of someone who figured it out, because as you said, we're all still figuring it out. But the key here is that it doesn't matter, because as long as you're constantly questioning yourself, what do I want? Why do I want it? Is this me? Does this fit my purpose? Does my purpose change? These types of questions are the ones that keep me self-aware. The mere fact that I don't have it figured out and that I realize that forces me to continually try to figure it out. So wow. Chapter 1 begins there.
I just kind of pieced something together for myself, and then we can sign it off, because this is the longest Monday motivation I think we've ever done.
Hey, Monday motivation has no time limits.
Right. But so when looking at self-awareness, I think there's a continuum of self-awareness that exists, and maybe one side of that is going to be neuroticism, where I think a lot of people who feel very self-conscious in social gatherings, whether or not they're extroverts, introverts, whatever the case may be, but they're very focused on, and they're looking at themselves, and they're looking at what they say and how that's going to be perceived by other people. And that type of self-awareness, if overdone, can be a detriment to your enjoyment and fulfillment in life. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you can really focus it, if you can really turn it into the identification of who you are and become comfortable with that, and use that vehicle of who you are as the way to achieve your goals or whatever you're looking to accomplish. That can kind of free you from that other side. So perhaps, I consider myself a little bit neurotic, and I'm hoping that on this journey, it's going to help me use that in a more positive way.
Yeah. Well, although I do, sorry to keep dragging this on.
All right. You got plenty of tape left.
I think you made an important distinction, but I'd like to clarify. So being self-conscious is not necessarily, there's some overlap, but it's not necessarily the same as self-awareness. Although you do employ a level of self-awareness when you identify as self-conscious. Self-conscious, I believe, is the ability for you to be consciously aware of the way that you're impacting those around you. Mm-hmm. It's a very good thing. When taken to the extreme, can be seen or felt as neurosis, right?
Right.
Or neuroticism. I'm not sure of the right term. But self-awareness, I think, is recognizing that you have the right reason for doing what you're doing, that this is your calling, that this is important to you, that you feel compelled. I keep using that word, and doing it anyway in the face of whatever may be, right? And let's speak to what we were talking about before this podcast, mm-hmm. Intuition. When you just get that feeling about somebody. And again, that unrealized or unmanifested emotional reaction. Well, being self-aware would mean giving yourself the freedom to express yourself most authentically, despite what that reaction may be. Because as you do that, while maybe you feel, or the fear is that 90% of people will reject who you are, there will always be that 10% out there in the world who will be your tribe. Yeah. And I always say find your tribe, because those are the ones who are going to empower you to be the quote-unquote weirdo that you are. And you want to be empowered in who you are, not in who people want you to be. So it's good to be self-conscious in presentation in professional environments, but always be so self-aware that you recognize the effects of what that consciousness brings you, right?
Yeah. That was very helpful.
Right. It doesn't matter if we went over time. There's going to be plenty more to come leading up to the book release. And we're also going to be leaving a lot of links and stuff for people to connect with you in order to, get some more updates when everything's getting released. So
are there going to be giveaway, signed books, stuff like that to look forward? I think we should do some stuff. Yeah,
all the way. We're doing this all the way.
We're doing podcasts. We're doing
the video, because
at
the new office, the new media room, it's going to be like pretty much rendition of what Gary Vee does, except with your spin.
Yeah,
nice.
So we do calls with people.
Yeah,
100%.
Well, Shaz, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next week.